Hi, Ella. So last week we left off where Walt and Slovak, at the end of chapter 5, had just found the entrance to the cave that Walt had fallen into. This is chapter 5 of the Golden Aquarians. It's your cave, Walt. You go first. If it's the right one, we don't know that for sure yet. He wriggled cautiously through the opening and slipped on the wet floor inside. Look out! He gave a hand to Slovak and waved his flashlight around. The cave was disappointingly small, little more than a swelling in a passage that vanished into darkness. Even when he shone the light directly at the dark patch, he could see only rock walls and more shadow. It had to be the way in, if this was the right place. But it looked awfully narrow. Suppose they started exploring and got stuck. He hesitated. Does that passage go on for long? He could feel Slovak's breath warm against his cheek. I don't know. I still don't know if it's the right cave. But you must remember. I guess I'm going to have to tell you, but you'll never believe me. Walt reluctantly explained about seeing the mysterious lights and then falling asleep. I know it sounds nuts, but that's what happened. I knew I was trapped. Then I went to sleep and had some weird dreams. When I woke up, I was out there. On the cold hillside, Slovak quoted, like the poor knight in La Belle Dame sans Merci. Maybe this is a magic cave. Who knows what'll happen to us? We might come out 100 years later, or be turned into pigs. Slovak sounded thrilled with the idea, and Walt chuckled. It was neat knowing someone who had read the same books. Suddenly, the weight of fear slipped from his shoulders. Let's go on and see what happens then. The passage was low as well as narrow, and he dropped to his knees. Painful though this was, it seemed safer to shuffle along, ready for any surprises. After a while, the passage turned towards the left. When he shone the flashlight in front of him, the light danced in small gold circles on damp rock directly ahead. You're all right. His voice boomed unexpectedly, as if he were talking into a jug. Just fine. Slovak sounded cheerful, not fussing a bit at the darkness and the damp. A great person to share an adventure with. To have as a friend, Walt thought. The passage turned right, and now, when he waved that flashlight around, he was dazzled by color. Slovak bumped into him from behind. What's the matter? We're there. We found it. They had emerged onto a wide, high platform, ending abruptly in a drop of some 2 or 3 meters. From their vantage point, they looked down onto a glittering forest of stone trees. Stone draperies covered the walls. Pillars rose from the floor and hung from the ceiling, all of it sparkling like diamonds as Walt's flashlight darted from detail to detail. It was like being in the choir loft of a cathedral. It's the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen. Who built it? Nobody? Nature? It happens on Earth too. For only the second time since arriving on Aqua, Walt felt he knew more about something than anyone else. Dissolved minerals precipitate out of the groundwater. The ones up there are called stalactites and I don't care about the names. He felt a twinge of annoyance at her interruption until he saw her face shining as she stared around. It's so... Yeah, it is, isn't it? His annoyance vanished, Ella, at her excitement. However, a sneeze. However, did you find your way through those stone pillars without a flashlight? He could laugh now that the nightmare was behind him. With a flashlight and a friend, he could conquer the world. I got this far before I gave up. He pointed down to the bottom of the ledge they were standing on. It's not that high, really. Only just beyond my reach. But in the dark I couldn't see. I thought it was the end of the cave. Want to let me down, Walt? Then you can climb down on my back. They managed to drop with no trouble and picked their way down a staircase of rocky ledges that brought them to a gentle slope and onto a deeper chamber, larger and higher than the first. Walt, wait. Slovak stooped to finger the edge of rock. I know you said the cave happened naturally, but look at this mark, and this. I don't think these stairs happened by themselves. Walt rubbed his finger over the marks. They were water-worn, but they did remind him of something he'd seen back home on the prairie. Arrowheads. That was it. Stones chipped by other stones, held in a human grasp. Slovak spread out her hand. Remember the print outside the cave? Yeah. It felt suddenly spooky. Walt waved the flashlight around, and the shadows of the pillars jumped from wall to wall like skinny ghosts. Anything could be down here in the darkness, watching them, and they would never know. For a second, panic jolted like an electric shock through his body. Then it was gone. When Slovak shivered, he put an arm awkwardly over her shoulder. It's okay. If they are here, I know they're friendly. He felt so sure it was as if someone had planted the idea in his head. He felt her relax. I know. I feel safe all of a sudden. Let's go on. He took her hand, warm and surprisingly small, in his, and led her down past the last of the pillars and stone draperies to the place where the water lapped, black as ink against the shore. He kept the light down towards the ground as they walked, and now he switched it off. Oh, what's the matter? Is the battery gone? How will we get back in the dark? Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. He held her hand tightly. It's okay, you'll see. Just wait, he whispered. He pulled her down until they were sitting at the edge of the lake. Slowly, shyly, the lights began to appear, shimmering, dancing on the surface of the water. He looked up. They seemed even more beautiful today, now that he wasn't alone, wasn't afraid. They crusted the vaulted roof, pulsing with the cold phosphorescent light. He hoped that she wouldn't spoil it by talking, asking questions. It was all right. Though he couldn't see her, he could sense her stillness beside him. The silence brought a wonderful sense of peace. Walt felt as if he had been drawn out of his body, that somehow he was hovering, weightless, above the dark lake. Into his mind flashed a myriad of bright images, like a wordless story told only in pictures. Time passed, though he had no idea how long. But at last, the final picture faded, and he once again felt the stony ground under his butt and Slovak's hand warm in his. She stirred and stretched. Without a word, they got to their feet and turned away from the starry lake. Silently, the flashlight guiding them, they retraced their steps. At the final ledge, Walt dropped to his knees so Slovak could climb onto his shoulder. Once safely up, she wriggled around and held out her hands, small but strong, and gave him the necessary lift. Beyond the twisting entrance tunnel lay the oblong gray of Aqua. It was a lot darker than when they had gone in. Almost twilight. We'll never make it in time for supper, said Walt. That's all right. Mom will give us a snack. So long as no one asks questions about where we've been. Don't worry so, she laughed. You are a worrier, you know, Walt. He realized that she was right. He had always worried. About making Aunt Gloria happy, about doing well in school, about his music, and making his father proud of him. How pretty Slovak looked with her fair hair rippling around her face, he suddenly noticed. She should always wear it loose instead of skinned back into those tight braids. She flushed at his stare and put her hands to her head. I'm a mess. Oh, my ribbons. We'd better reclaim them before we go. They're just ribbons, and we're awfully late already. They point to the entrance. We found it. So might anyone else. Of course, sorry. But the ribbons were gone. The wind, do you think? I don't see how. I tied them in double knots. It's crazy, but at least no one else can use them to find the cave. Walt panted as they jogged down the slope to where they'd left the canoe. He flipped it over and was about to push it back into the water when Slovak stopped him. Look, she began to laugh. Attached to the center thwarts of the canoe were the yellow ribbons, twisted into a design like the one Walt had tripped over on the walkway weeks before. What can it mean? Slovak wondered. Does it have to mean anything except that whoever did this has a great sense of humor? I think so. She fingered the crossed and twisted strands. Of course, I don't really know. But I think it means something like hello. And this ends our reading of part 1 of chapter 5.